Have you ever wondered what it feels like when a lifetime of struggle, of pain, of hope, all comes down to a single world-changing day? Well, today we're going to dive into Nelson Mandela's own words to experience the dawn of a new South Africa, right through the eyes of the man who made it happen.
On May 10, 1994, this was the headline that flashed across the entire globe. Think about it. After more than 300 years of white rule, Nelson Mandela had just become the first black president of South Africa. And this was after the nation's first ever truly democratic elections. This was a moment the whole world had been holding its breath for.
And to really get the weight of that moment, we have to be crystal clear about what was ending: apartheid. This wasn't just some vague prejudice. It was a brutal legal system of racial domination. It was designed from the ground up by white-skinned people to control the dark-skinned people of their very own land. This was the law. And on this day, that system was finally being torn down.
All right, so let's step into that incredible day. A day Mandela himself saw as the moment his nation was reborn.
Mandela remembers the day dawning bright and clear. He said that for days he'd been, and I love this phrase, pleasantly besieged by world leaders and dignitaries. You have to understand, the inauguration in Pretoria, this wasn't just some local event. It was the single largest gathering of international leaders South Africa had ever hosted. The entire world had its eyes on them. And with the whole world watching, these were some of his very first words as president. He just frames the moment so perfectly. This wasn't just about politics. No, this was an answer to what he called an extraordinary human disaster. It was a promise to create a new society built on justice, on peace, and on human dignity for everyone.
And you know, the symbolism of this day it was everywhere. It started with the location itself, a place that Mandela would see as a rainbow gathering.
The contrast here is just staggering. The ceremony was held at the Union Buildings Amphitheater, and for decades, as Mandela points out, this was the absolute seat of white supremacy. It was the heart of the old system. But on this day, he looked out and saw it transformed into a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations. The very symbol of oppression had become the stage for liberation.
And you can just feel how deeply he felt this change. Because of apartheid, South Africa had been treated like an outlaw state, a pariah. So this gathering, it was so much more than a ceremony. It was the moment his country was finally being welcomed back into the family of nations. You can just sense the immense pride in his words.
And it wasn't just the location. The entire day was packed with these powerful symbolic moments that just screamed, "This is a completely new era."
So just moments after he spoke, the sky just roars to life. You have this massive display of military aircraft flying overhead in perfect formation. But Mandela didn't see this as just a show of military might. To him, it was a clear, unmistakable demonstration of the military's loyalty to the new, freely elected democracy.
And then, things got even more personal. The highest-ranking generals of the Defense Force and the police, we're talking men whose chests were covered in medals from the apartheid era, they saluted him. They pledged their loyalty. And this is where the sheer irony just hits you. Mandela was completely aware of it. The very same men who would have thrown him in jail a few years earlier were now saluting him as their commander-in-chief. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more powerful symbol of change than that. And then there was the music, another key symbol. 2 national anthems were sung, Nkosi Sikelel' Afrika, which was the anthem of the liberation movement, and Die Stem, the old anthem of the White Republic. Mandela pointed out that on that day, neither group really knew the words to the other's song, but he was sure that soon they would know them by heart. It was reconciliation happening right there in real time. But even in this moment of just unbelievable joy, Mandela's thoughts turned to the past. He said he was overwhelmed with a sense of history, and he started reflecting on the long, brutal fight and the true price of this freedom. He thought about the whole arc of the 20th century. In its first decade, before he was even born, this system of white supremacy was built. And now, in its very last decade, he was watching it get overturned forever. He had literally lived through the entire story, from beginning to end.
He felt so strongly that this victory wasn't his, not his alone. He described himself as simply the sum of all those African patriots who had come before him. And he felt this deep pain that he couldn't thank them, and that they couldn't see what all their unimaginable sacrifices had finally achieved. He honored these patriots by name.
people like Oliver Tambo and Walter Cicero, his friends and mentors. And he had this profound idea that the decades of brutality had this unintended side effect. It forged these men of extraordinary courage and wisdom. It's a deep thought, right? That it might take such depths of oppression to create such heights of human character.
And this all led him to this beautiful conclusion about what his nation was really worth. I mean, South Africa is famous for its gold and diamonds, but for Mandela, that was never the real treasure. He said the country's greatest wealth was its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds.
And it was from these people, his comrades in the struggle, that he learned what courage really meant. See, for him, it wasn't about being fearless. He had seen men and women risk everything, endure horrible torture, and not break. So for him, courage was much simpler. It's the triumph over fear.
This deep reflection on the past brought Mandela to what might be his most radical and most humane idea of all, a vision of freedom that had to include absolutely everyone.
He realized his own idea of freedom had changed over his life. As a kid, freedom was just running in the fields and swimming in the stream. As a young man, it became a hunger for personal freedom, earning a living, raising a family. But then he slowly realized that as long as his people weren't free, he couldn't really be free either. And his personal hunger for freedom became a greater hunger for the freedom of all.
And this is what led him to a truly radical conclusion, that freedom can't be divided. In his mind, the oppressor is just as much a prisoner as the oppressed. They're just locked behind different bars, the bars of prejudice and hatred. He argued that both of them are robbed of their humanity.
So where did this incredible empathy come from? He said that even in the absolute darkest times in prison, he would sometimes see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. And that little glimmer was enough to reassure him that human goodness is like a flame. It can be hidden, but it can never, ever be put out. And so we end with this. A core idea for Mandela's reflections is that a system of oppression damages everyone it touches. And that leaves us with a really big question. For any society recovering from deep wounds, what does it truly take to heal?